Scientists have finally revealed the truth about the Titanic. On April 14, 1912, at 11:40 p.m., a terrible event occurred aboard the British liner Titanic, one that would sink the ship just 3 hours later. At 2:20 a.m. on April 15th, the largest ship of its time was swallowed by the icy waters of the Atlantic Ocean. As it descended to the bottom, the Titanic took more than 1,500 lives with it, 2/3 of everyone on board. The cause of this horrific disaster, which led to so many deaths, was a collision with an iceberg. At least, that's what we've always been told. But recent scientific discoveries have debunked this theory. In this video, we'll tell you the whole truth about the sinking of the Titanic, a truth that remained hidden for more than a century. At 268 meters and 23 centimeters long, 28 meters wide, 53 meters tall, with a carrying capacity of 46,328 tons, the Titanic seemed unsinkable. To walk through all its decks and corridors, you would have to cover several kilometers. Even the ship's officers needed more than 2 weeks just to begin finding their way around this enormous structure. The Titanic had 4 massive smokestacks. Each weighed 60 tons and rose 25 meters and 12 centimeters above the deck. That impressive height was necessary so that the 100 tons of soot blown out of the funnels every day wouldn't settle on the ship and its passengers. The funnels were installed at a 30-degree angle to make them look even more striking and majestic. The price of the liner was equally impressive. Its construction cost $7.5 million. Accounting for modern exchange rates and inflation, such a project would have cost $166 million in 2016. Meanwhile, filming the world-famous 1997 movie Titanic would have cost even more, $200 million. The Harland and Wolff shipyard hired 3,000 men to build the vessel. Even with such an enormous workforce, laboring 6 days a week starting at 6 in the morning, the task proved so massive that the Titanic wasn't launched until 26 months later. It was difficult and dangerous construction. Imagine working at the height of a 20-story building without safety harnesses. But people needed money to feed their families. Workers earned £2 a week. It doesn't sound very tempting, but back then it was a decent wage. During the Titanic's construction, 8 men died at the shipyard, and 246 were injured. Given all the effort and money invested in creating this giant machine, it's very hard to believe it fell victim to a simple iceberg. And now, new discoveries suggest that the real cause of the disaster wasn't ice, it was fire. Journalist Shannon Malone has been investigating the Titanic disaster for more than 30 years. He was the one who discovered an enormous 9-meter black mark on the ship's hull. He noticed it while studying a photograph taken before the ship's departure. Malone had managed to find an album of previously unknown photos taken during the construction and preparation of the liner for its first and only voyage. Judging by the marks, the fire burned for 3 weeks at extremely high temperatures before anyone noticed and extinguished it. Metallurgy experts are confident that such exposure could easily weaken the metal, reducing its strength by as much as 75%. That's why the iceberg tore through the ship's hull plating so easily. If not for the fire, it never would have happened. However, the fact that the iceberg struck exactly where the metal had been weakened is just one link in a chain of astonishing and tragic events that led to the Titanic's destruction. The construction managers knew about the fire, and they knew the ship shouldn't set out on that fateful voyage. But delaying departure meant bankruptcy for the ship owners. At that very moment, coal miners were striking across the country, and there was little coal left to keep the Titanic's furnaces burning. Yet tickets had already been sold out, and other voyages had been canceled. Everyone wanted to be among the first to sail on the largest ship in history. So the Titanic's owners bought up every bit of coal they could find, even taking coal from other ships. Canceling the voyage was simply not an option. To hide the truth, the ship was turned so that the scorched side faced the ocean. As a result, passengers on the pier couldn't see any trace of the fire. And so the journey began. The interior of London's Ritz Hotel served as the model for the Titanic's decor. The grand staircase descended through 7 of the ship's 10 decks. It was adorned with paintings, bronze cherub figures, and oak paneling. Amenities for first-class passengers included a heated swimming pool, Turkish baths, a gym, a squash court, and a beauty salon. Ladies could even call for a hairdresser to help them get ready for dinner. The liner published its own newspaper, the Atlantic Daily Bulletin. The Titanic also had a special area for first-class passengers' dogs, where pets were fed, taken for walks, and could even receive training during the voyage. Dinner for first class was a lavish ceremony lasting about 5 hours, consisting of 13 courses, each paired with its own special wine. The ship carried 1,500 bottles of wine, 20,000 bottles of beer, and 8,000 cigars, but not a single pair of binoculars. Why does that fact deserve attention? Because binoculars could have saved the Titanic. This is yet another tragic coincidence in the chain of fatal events. Back then, there was no sonar, so lookouts scanned the horizon with binoculars to spot dangers in the ship's path. But on the Titanic, all the binoculars remained locked in a special cabinet. The only man with the key, Second Officer David Blair, was replaced at the last minute. He was in such a hurry to leave the ship that he forgot to hand the key to his replacement. This oversight was only discovered 3 days later, when the liner was already far out at sea. Had the crew had access to binoculars, the Iceberg would have been spotted much earlier, and the collision could have been avoided. The tragedy might also have been averted if the ship hadn't been traveling above its safe speed. The Titanic had fallen behind schedule, and that was unacceptable for its reputation. That's why it moved at a speed far higher than its machinery was designed for. Another act of criminal negligence involved the lifeboats. To accommodate everyone on board, the Titanic needed about 60 lifeboats. Chief designer Alexander Carlisle decided to equip the ship with only 48, and over time, that number was cut even further, down to 20. This was done for aesthetic reasons, since 48 lifeboats made the deck look too cluttered. The remaining 20 boats could hold only a third of everyone on board. It's hard to believe, but such a monstrous shortage of lifeboats wasn't considered a violation. Under the laws of the time, the number of lifeboats depended not on the number of passengers, but on the ship's tonnage. At the dawn of the 20th century, lifeboat drills were standard practice on ocean liners. They allowed the crew to prepare passengers for possible emergencies. However, such drills were never held on the Titanic. Captain Edward John Smith canceled the drill scheduled for the morning of the day the ship struck the iceberg. The reasons for that decision remain unclear, especially considering that other ships had warned the Titanic about ice in the area. That may be why it took the crew more than half an hour to lower the lifeboats into the water, instead of the standard 10 minutes. Some also blame Captain Smith, because the first lifeboats left the ship half empty. The very first one carried only 27 passengers, despite being designed to hold 65. Why weren't the lifeboats filled? Because people hesitated to evacuate, not realizing they were in real danger. In 2012, researchers learned that Captain Smith had failed his first navigation exam. He passed it later, but who knows? Perhaps that also played a role in the tragedy. As the Titanic was sinking, the crew managed to send out several distress signals, but the ship Californian passing nearby ignored the distress rockets launched from the liner. The Californian's captain was later dismissed once this became public knowledge. Nevertheless, recent findings by historians have proven his innocence. Well, better late than never. The fact that no one saw the Titanic's signals may be explained by the phenomenon of refraction. When layers of cold air sit beneath layers of warmer air, thermal inversion occurs. This, in turn, causes abnormal bending of light. Simply put, it creates mirages. Similar mirages were recorded by several other ships sailing in those latitudes. Historian Tim Malton is also convinced that light refraction prevented the lookouts from spotting the iceberg that night. Criminal negligence, or a tragic chain of coincidences, fire, or ice. Whatever the causes, the sinking of the Titanic claimed hundreds of lives and still captures the minds of researchers and ordinary people alike. Which theory do you believe? Share your opinion in the comments. We've just opened your eyes to one of the mysteries that has long fascinated you. Don't forget to hit the like button. If this video gets 15,000 likes, we'll tell you about the secrets of the Mariana Trench. Subscribe to our Ironcog channel to watch more amazing videos. Stay with us.